Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Naia Lax updates. How are we doing today, Tucker?
We're doing great because we have a lot of lacrosse news to be covered. The snow has melted here in Dubuque, Iowa. Warmer weather is in the air, lacrosse is in the air, and I'm going to skip all the comedic formalities as we have quite a bit of a rundown to go through. Let's just jump off the bat, guys. We're gonna try to make this a prime timed episode, so it's not going to take too much of your time, but we're going to cover it all because there's a lot of NAI games, NAI D3 games, NAI D2 games. NAI lacrosse is a little bit all over the place, and that's why we're going to delegate so much time to it in this episode. So John, take it away. Whatever we're going to start with, let's do some breakdowns. Breakdowns.
I wanted to start with the Benedictine versus Quincy one because I know we were both a little bit surprised on this one, not terribly, but Quincy ends up beating Benedictine 9-7. What were your thoughts on this one?
My thoughts were all over the place with this game. This is probably the game that I watched the most from these breakdowns this week, so I got to see what was going on. I realized really kind of where the score came from, what happened, recruiting breakdown on both sides. So Quincy, for those who did not listen to the last episode, Quincy is a Division II school in Quincy, Illinois. They are about 3 hours from me here in Dubuque, Iowa. Not really a traditional lacrosse area, but a decent D2 school with good athletic funding. They introduced lacrosse, I want to say 4 years ago, and I think this is like their second real season, their second kind of sturdy season. They're in an area where they're definitely recruiting against Benedictine. They're recruiting against a lot of the NAI teams of this area. They're recruiting against Lewis, a D2 school, the Lewis Flyers. So it's interesting because these two teams probably had guys that were being recruited by both of them. Quincy is primarily a younger roster because obviously they haven't had a team for as long. I think there's a few seniors on there, some transfers on there I was looking at. Decent numbers. They probably sit mid NAI. I would maybe even say mid to low NAI. They're kind of just there. They're one of those D2 teams that's new, that's existing in the Midwest, that is definitely making leaps and bounds every single year. But I was most surprised by this because in my mind, I kind of circled this game as a statement game. Like primarily or historically rather, Benedictine plays Rockhurst every preseason, and Rockhurst is a very good Division II team. And historically speaking, Benedictine has put up good numbers against Rockhurst. Benedictine's women's team has beat Rockhurst, I think, like 2 of the last 3 years. So I was a little bit confused to see a Quincy Benedictine game because that was strange to me. I didn't think it was going to be as big of a test for Benedictine, and I really thought it was going to be a statement game between an NAI and Division II game. So I'm a little bit surprised. I don't want to, shame Benedictine too much or harp on them that much because it is an early game. It was their first game. It doesn't matter that much in the standings. It doesn't affect NAI gameplay at all. But it is interesting to see. I was a little bit curious to see the sidelines of Benedictine. They returned a couple of guys that I recognized, obviously, but their sidelines seemed to be lighter than what I would have expected. I couldn't get a good number exactly. It seemed like both sidelines were pretty equal on this one. Benedictine had some cool new red uniforms. I did see that. But lower numbers than I think historic Benedictine than we saw, playing against a mid-tier D2 team, not a Rockhurst, which again was interesting. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's just kind of surprising. The gameplay wasn't bad. Watching the game, offensive moved the ball well. Defense was moving the ball well. The team seemed to match up well. Goalies played about equal. It seemed like kind of a neck and neck game as that score reflected. What that means for Benedictine moving forward in conference play, I don't know until I see the rest of the KCAC teams play. That's when we'll really know. But I would say it is a little bit surprising early on to see Quincy beat Benedictine.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then moving on to probably what was the shock of the weekend. St. Ambrose 12, Indiana Tech 7.
KCAC.
I picked Indiana Tech, but I think I said it would be a close one. But I was wrong.
I also, in full transparency, I think I picked Indiana Tech as well because I don't think either of us in our right minds going into this weekend could have sat here and felt 100% comfortable about picking Indiana Tech. I mean, I'll be honest with you, talking with some buddies on Ambrose, they knew they were going to play a really tough team. Like that was very clear. They went in there with the mentality we're going to play a really hard team and we're going to have to play hard against the hard team. So props to them for doing that and then some. I think that's a huge statement win, a huge win in the rankings early, a surprising win in all honesty. Like I'm not going to be the guy that's like, yeah, we saw this one coming, because we didn't. But it's an awesome surprise, you know, in the KCAC, all of us in the KCAC, we love seeing it. Those of you in the WAC watching that, I think we're probably looking at it more of like, has Indiana Tech fallen from that top spot? What do we take away from this? There's a lot of questions to be raised. Again, we can't take too much from early games because they're early games. Mid-season form is when we'll really know what's going on. But that, in my opinion, was a very sharp St. Ambrose team that knew what they were doing. They were playing physical in that game, playing against an Indiana Tech that probably expected to go in there and win. They seemed like they wanted to go in there and dominate, and I think St. Ambrose just flipped the script on them. St. Ambrose, you know, their goalie, hats off to him, played an incredible game there. Got the little brick wall gif going around there I saw for a little bit on the Twitter. But I think that was exciting because that was one of the games that we had circled that we didn't know what was going to come from it, but we were going to be excited either way. There's some interesting developments that we may hear of that came from that game. There were some, you know, players in there. There were more players on some sides than we had expected. The roster sizes were different. It was kind of all over the place, but that's what made it so interesting. And shout out to whoever got that stream up there because we wanted to watch that game. That was awesome. I just think it's a big statement for the other teams in the WAC to realize that they have an opportunity to change the script this year. And I think St. Ambrose has momentum and a lot of momentum going forward here. What were your takeaways from that game? And I should even ask more, you know, you being a pretty defensive minded guy, what did you see from the defenses of those two teams? I don't really pay attention to that as much.
Yeah, so in full transparency, I only got to watch the second half of this game because I had just gotten off of work when it started. And it was a pretty close game when I turned it on. I want to say Ambrose was only up like 1 or 2. So even when I turned it on, it was a little surprising. But the thing I would say is the Indiana Tech, like, full, we're going to press you for the whole game, like, try and force turnovers. That was nowhere to be found from what I was watching. They looked kind of slow, not a lot of pressure, just kind of letting St. Ambrose dictate the style of play. And I mean, the offense of Indiana Tech was a little bit more fast-paced, but it seemed pretty slow compared to normal as well. So I'm not sure if that's just lack of maybe outside days or what's going on there. I know a couple of the alumni were talking, the Indiana Tech alums before the game were saying that it sounds like there's a couple of pretty key Indiana Tech defensemen, close defensemen that are redshirting this year for whatever reason. So
Wow.
one, maybe 2 starters out of the 3. So
That's
definitely an eye on.
And I feel like too, I think Ambrose really capitalized. I noticed a lot coming up from X, kind of carrying the ball up and drawing that low guy and then dishing high, because it seemed like every time they came around one side of X, one side around the crease, there was a guy open up top to take a step down. Like that just seemed to always be a look. And the weird thing I would say about this game that I saw a lot of was that Ambrose was shooting from a lot of the same places and getting away with it and finding opportunities without Indiana Tech adjusting, realizing that those guys would be taking those opportunities over and over again. So I didn't see a lot of adjustment on the defensive end for Indiana Tech to stop them, which again is, like you said, it's not really common of Indiana Tech to see something like that.
Agreed. And then the last point on this one I would say is I was a little surprised which goalie they went with. I mean, no disrespect to Ned Bull. He's played a little bit over the past couple of years, so it was nice to kind of get to see them stick with the loyalty. but I was kind of expecting the freshman, what is it, Truble, is that his next name or something to that effect? Very highly rated freshman goalie. I thought we would have seen him a little bit in that one.
Yeah, that's kind of my mind was on that. There was a few personnel choices that I guess I'm kind of wondering if it was just like an early matchup situation where they just wanted to get everyone looks and see how it was going. They were playing, in outside of Indianapolis, in a big indoor facility attached to the Colts training facility. It's an awesome sportsplex. They got to get, snow-free play. And I think for both teams, it was probably just a time to, hey, let's get out there, let's have full space and see what goes down. But I think that really just turned into a huge momentum booster for the Bees of Ambrose.
Absolutely. And then moving on to the next game, we'll stick with the Ambrose theme. They played Taylor I think it was the very next day, and they won 15-5, but it felt a lot closer up until midway through the third when Ambrose just kind of exploded for probably 7-8 in a row. You think that's more of like a fatigue thing from just like the day before, maybe an energy dump for being the number 2 team, or do you think it's something a little more serious?
To be honest with you, I think our prediction of, hey, was this a trap game? I think it fell into place a little bit, but in a different way than we had expected. My assumption is that they were high off of the win against Indiana Tech. And again, I'll say it every single time. Taylor is consistently an underrated team that gets slept on. And I have to assume that was the case here, that they looked at Indiana Tech in the way that they normally play Taylor and thought, okay, Taylor's, going to be more of an easy win. The thing about Taylor that I said from the start is Taylor is big, physical Indiana lacrosse. And that is exactly what I saw from Taylor, until Ambrose pulled away. That's what was keeping Taylor in the game, in my opinion. Was I don't know who their pulls are, but my goodness, Taylor had some pulls that were absolutely laying some lumber and were playing really hard defense, physical defense. They had big guys matched up against little guys. I was really impressed to see that brand of really Midwest lacrosse that they pulled out there. And I think also I two things that I give props to Taylor right off the bat is their midfielders were playing their A game. I mean, twice I saw midfielders take it from the goalie, run all the way upfield, get past the defensive Ambrose and score. Like they had kids take it coast to coast twice, which is nuts, but they were dodging well. They were moving well. They were passing well. They were looking for the next guy. So I felt like until Ambrose pulled away, this really was a neck and neck game. I think Taylor probably wanted to win that game that much more because they saw the Indiana Tech score. I have to assume that. It also seemed like Taylor had pretty good roster numbers this year with good players. So again, I'll say it. I mean, even though Taylor came away with a loss, I think they put a great show together. And I think in typical Ambrose fashion, once Ambrose finds momentum in a game, even if it's late, they're going to pull away. Like the second that Ambrose finds a gap, an opportunity, and they see what's working, they take it and go with it. And that's what you and I were texting about as they started to pull away was here's the space, here's what's happening. They're finding the opportunity, they're going with it, and they keep hitting it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think my big takeaway on this one was I wouldn't really be concerned with the final score at all. I think it's mainly just a little bit of a trap game. Not only is it sometimes a little bit harder to get motivated for those kind of mid-level teams, but also when you beat a top 5 team that maybe you weren't expected to beat, coming down to play someone a little bit beneath that is very tough as well.
It is. And I will say, I think the thing to add about this as well is with the way the WAC is already shaking up, it's not what we expected. Nothing about the WAC is what we expected in any of our preseason podcasts. Nothing about it is what we could have expected a week and a half ago. And I think with that being said, I think Taylor has the opportunity to play a bigger role in the WAC this year than they ever had before. So I think that changes a little bit. And I think more than ever, I mean, we haven't seen Columbia play yet, but I think after seeing Ambrose play twice this weekend, I think Ambrose is in a very good position in the KCAC as well. So both teams, I think, out of this game are in good spots for their conference.
Agreed. And then moving on, let's talk about a little bit of Weber's kind of wild week, playing 3 games and against very quality opponents. To start out with Aquinas. Aquinas ended up winning 9-8 in one that ended in double overtime. What'd you see from that one?
So I didn't watch a lot of this game, but the score alone is awesome. Like, that's the kind of game I want to see any day of the week. I'll go watch it. Like, that's phenomenal. I think this answers a lot of questions about the new era of Aquinas. Having a new coach moved over from Monmouth in Illinois here, new players. It's essentially kind of a new program in my mind. Playing against Weber, deep rostered, guys who have been outside a whole lot. They've already played quite a few games up to this point. That's a pretty good matchup, those two teams. I think Aquinas is probably going to be a little bit better than I had expected them to be this year, which is awesome. I'm actually happy to see that, to be honest with you. And I don't think in my mind, when the score comes down to that result in my mind shows that those two teams are pretty equal. I'm not sure of the roster numbers on Aquinas this year. I do know the roster numbers on Weber are very deep. So I'm wondering, did Aquinas play with fewer guys and just have the skill there, or was it a pretty equal roster game? I mean, what did you see from this? Because I think you probably know a little bit more about this game than I did.
Yeah, Weber definitely had more bodies. But I would say the main thing is I think Aquinas maybe had a little bit more experience on the roster, and then also Weber's got to stay out of the penalty box. They got quite a few in this game, and I'd say even more than just getting the penalties, it was kind of a matter of when they got the penalties. I mean, it seemed like late in the fourth quarter, whenever they had a chance to kind of put it away, they'd get a penalty, and then ended up being the downfall in overtime and double overtime. They got penalties. It was actually a man-up goal that Aquinas won it on. Shout out to Joey Fitzgerald. And then Bo Ryder also played amazing in cage for Aquinas. He had probably 18 to 20 saves.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think this has been the downfall for a while on Weber is penalty minutes. They got a lot of guys, but they also got a lot of penalty minutes. How they fix that, I don't know. Do you just find more consistency in the same guys? How that works out? I also think this was a very different opponent for them than they normally see. They played a few MCLA games. They played a few MCLA kind of Southern teams. And then you come to Michigan and like we had talked about, what do we expect from the WAC? We expect, kind of strong physical play. And I think it was just probably a different style of play that they were adjusting to in that first game.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. Sorry, my cat's messing with the blinds a little bit, guys. And then moving on to Weber's second game, they were able to bounce back. It was Weber 14, Sienna Heights 7. The only real takeaways I had from this were Potter and Gallagher were kind of the two, as we know, studs for Sienna Heights. It didn't really look like they had a whole lot going on other than those two. What do you think about that one?
Weber, dominant win. Just even if it's a 7-goal win, in my mind, that's a pretty dominant win. Sienna Heights is another program they're always on the cusp of greatness there. That's the easiest way to say it. They got a lot of good guys and they always put it together at certain times of the year. We've seen it a lot in the past that their first couple of games, it doesn't reflect very well. And then they'll go play, a top 10 opponent later in the season and hang right with them or beat them. It's very interesting to see, but I think all around, in my mind, that's a dominant win for Weber. They have to leave that game thinking that was a big benchmark win, getting a WAC win right away. And probably, again, I think they probably had adjusted to play of WAC lacrosse by that point.
Yeah, I think the big thing, the takeaway, if you're a Sienna Heights kind of fan or just someone who wants to see them do well, is there's got to be a little bit more consistent, as we said. I mean, I think it was last year or the year before they stunned Cumberlands out of nowhere. And then other games, you're like, surely Sienna Heights is going to win this one, and then they lose. I mean, yeah. I think they picked Weber, so I wasn't like too shocked, but I thought it was going to be pretty close.
Yeah, and I think the thing to kind of take in mind too, with when we talk about WAC stuff for all you guys, for your information out there, a lot of these WAC teams, these Michigan teams, are really close together, and they are 100% recruiting against each other. So when it comes down to it, whatever program is going to offer the most money and have the most amenities in a program, they're going to build a dominant roster of the WAC. And it's not to say that Aquinas hasn't done that. They've had really good years. And the tragic passing of Ed Maloney, that was a big blow, I know, to the program. And I think as we normally see with Aquinas, as the year goes on, I think we'll only see them go, or not Aquinas, as Sienna Heights goes on, I think we'll only see them get better. And they're actually one of those teams that, if I were a betting man, I would bet on them having a very strong second half of the season. And I think if they do that, they put themselves in a very good position again in the WAC, because we're now seeing more and more the WAC is kind of open for people to play in.
Agreed. And then closing out the Weber portion, they went back down south to play number 4 Cumberlands, and they fell 9-5. What did you see from that one?
No, what did you see from that one? You start.
Okay. I'd say first off, shout out to Pork Chop. It was great to see him back in cage. I was a little nervous just the whole first game back from an ACL. I know it could be a little nerve-wracking, but I mean, he looked just as good as usual. So shout out to him for that. And then one of the bigger things was, so Jake Morgan was back at Cumberlands, the All-American LSM. And as we predicted, they moved him from LSM to close to match up with Q, which I thought was kind of an interesting move, because I thought they might put him on Jackson to kind of slow, because Jackson's more of a facilitator. They took him off of Q, and that kind of really just slowed down the offense, just him being one of their main shooters is what I noticed. Another big issue they had, probably what I would say cost them the game. They had 29 turnovers, and it seemed like probably 75, 80% of those were on clears.
Wow. I didn't realize that. Wow. That's a game changer. I mean, that's a 5-10 goal game changer.
Yeah, it wasn't their greatest game. And I mean, I still think they played decent. I mean, playing within 4 goals of a top 4 team, especially one as talented and deep as Cumberlands, is something to be proud of. But I don't know. I just thought they would have looked a little bit more crisp. I mean, I'm sure after that, like the end of the road trip, I'm sure they were just exhausted though also.
Yeah. Love to see Cumberland's lacrosse back, man. I love watching their streams. Great, great sports info department, great sports marketing. It's exciting to see NAI lacrosse represented the way that Cumberland's always does. I think Weber has to be a little bit more conscious of that game, especially because that very much matters to their standing and where they sit, not only nationally, but in their conference in the AAC. I think Cumberland's only gets better from that game. And I think Weber just has to work on some things, knowing where they really sit with that level of an opponent. I think it was a fast run and gun game, but I think you're exactly right. Putting somebody on cue to kind of slow him down, even just slow him down, is a big move to try to slow down their offense. And that's exactly what we saw in that game. I think we also saw Cumberland's play pretty strong physical defense. And that's what we expected to see from Cumberland's. They're a program that brings that every single year. So I think, it wasn't a blowout score. It was, more or less close. It was probably an exciting atmosphere to be there to see a Cumberland's opener, as they always are. But I do think both teams leave that only getting better, each with their own objectives. And I think Cumberland's probably had that game circled as kind of a, hey, we need to win this. Like, we really need to win this if we're going to continue with our legacy. And I think they did that and secured that. And Weber just knows what they have to go back and fix now.
Agreed. Do you think Weber would have been better off playing that game at the beginning of the trip?
Yes.
Or do you? Okay.
So my grasp and understanding of Weber's roster is Weber has a lot of guys. To an outside person, they're going to look at that roster and be like, man, that's a deep rostered team. But in reality, I'm not shaming any of their guys. They're all at different points in their lacrosse development. I think they have a very good starting line and probably a pretty decent second line kind of situation. But I think there is a fall off there that you can't rely completely on your deeper guys. You have to have a strong starting lineup that's willing to stay in their majority of the game if they have to. And so I think that's kind of what we saw there. Again, with a deep roster, you would assume they'd be good 3 games in even, but I think it is that discrepancy in skill level or lacrosse experience that they would have been better off playing that earlier, especially knowing that it was a conference game. I definitely think playing it earlier would have helped them, but maybe the strategy was, hey, let's go get 2 more games of, hard whack experience and then jump into it. There's different ways you could have taken it. I personally think of it as, hey, let's get that one as our first game where we're in the best shape and we're not injured at all. You're playing a team in a game that really matters.
Yeah, I could definitely see it going either way, like mindset wise. And then moving on, we had William Penn taking on Dearborn, especially a pretty exciting game. William Penn won 7-5. What'd you think on this one?
That was fun. That's a fun game. William Penn picks up another win. They ring their little mobile bell as they go on their trip. Always love seeing that. Again, fun, exciting NAI brand of lacrosse. I think my biggest takeaway from this is that Dearborn's a lot better than I thought. And I think Dearborn probably went into that game knowing they had to prove that they were better than everyone thought, because Dearborn was one of those teams that had more or less been on a hiatus, that hadn't been playing a lot of lacrosse, that at one point during the pandemic had to write their president a letter just trying to get them to be able to play. That was a whole strange situation, but they're back. I think they're in a good position. And I think they're one of those teams after this game that's in a very good position in the WAC, I would say, that nobody would have expected Dearborn to be in. I didn't see anything wrong with William Penn's play. I thought William Penn played strong. I thought they matched up with this team. I saw a lot of good clears. I saw a lot of good offense, I would say, on both sides. Especially I saw good offense. A lot of kind of quick, shifty play. That was exciting to see. William Penn's goalie, but he always plays well. I think this was really simply down to it, just 2 good teams matching up.
Yeah, the main thing I would say is Dearborn probably has 2, maybe 3 really good freshmen who I don't think a lot of people kind of were talking too much about. So it'll be interesting to see how far those guys can carry them. I don't know how much they'll produce this year, but I would definitely look forward in the next 2 to 3 years for those. If they can keep that core group of players, they'll be pretty solid the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And then I'm really concerned with William Penn. I just say that some of the looks they were taking offensively weren't always there.
I would agree. I think also the thing I think about William Penn in this situation is after coming off of a very dominant, heavy win at Cornell and going into a game like Dearborn, not knowing what the heck was going on at Dearborn in the first place, they were probably trying to take a lot of the same looks that they had in a dominant situation against Cornell.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being a case. And then moving on, we had Kaiser kind of had a little bit of an interesting week as well. And I know me and you talked after the first game, we're a little bit surprised. And this really isn't a dig at Shorter, the D2 program we've talked about quite a bit, but they're not exactly a high-end D2. They wouldn't be really high-end NAIA. But Kaiser beat them 14-6. And I know what some of y'all are saying, like that's a solid win, 8 goals, but I mean, we're talking about a team Reinhardt beat by, I think, 30. I think Tennessee Wesleyan beat them by 25, something like that. So just seeing that Kaiser struggled a little bit. And then I know a couple people who were at that game and said Shorter actually played their backup goalie due to an injury to the starter as well. So it's just,
wow.
I don't know. It was a little weird to me.
Yeah. No, it's just like what you and I were saying when we were talking. It was surprising because of the goal differential from the other 2 games of NAI teams against Shorter of a caliber that we would expect to be similar to Kaiser. I honestly, I think that's, even though Kaiser won, I think that's the most surprising score of any team that I saw this weekend. I definitely had that as a, hey, I want to see Kaiser win by, 15, 20 goals at least. And I wanted to see them hold Shorter to 1 or 2 goals kind of thing. It's Kaiser's first game. It's early to speculate. I don't know what the heck's going on. I know they lost a couple key players. They're looking with a little bit of a different roster. That is for sure. No question there whatsoever. Maybe Shorter was just tired of getting absolutely dogged on by teams. That's a fully potential situation. I agree with you, though. Shorter's, for lack of better terms, Shorter is below the mid-tier D2. They are low on roster, low on a lot of situations, in a very recoup building situation. I have no idea what happened at that Shorter Kaiser game, but that was surprising. And that was surprising in how we saw Kaiser in the national rankings and in the AAC rankings more than anything, because I look at Reinhardt and I'm like, okay, Reinhardt beat Shorter, this exact same team, with their starting goalie by a lot of goals. And yet somehow Shorter was still in the game per se against Kaiser. What does that mean? Was there COVID protocol going on with Kaiser in any way? Were we missing a few guys? Were there injuries? Whatever happened, that score just doesn't make sense to me. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, and then Kaiser followed that up with, they were playing, I want to say it's Sewanee.
Sewanee in Tennessee. Yep.
And it looks like they lost. I might have the score wrong. I forgot to write down the score, but I believe they lost 9-8 in overtime.
It was a one goal differential, correct?
Yeah, I know it was an overtime one, and that was a little bit, I don't want to say too surprising, because I think Sewanee is definitely a step up from Shorter, but again, I think last year Kaiser would have probably handled them pretty reasonably.
Yeah, that I think this Sewanee game reinforced my concerns, and I wouldn't even say current concerns, but speculations about where Kaiser's at right now. Sewanee is a team out of Tennessee. They're a D3 team, beautiful campus, extremely academically hard school. They normally attract pretty good players. They're, a pretty average, probably above average Southern D3 team, I would say, especially in the South. That has good numbers, good financial support, a lot of stuff going into them. They ran into some pretty bad controversial trouble as a team, I believe, last season. And so I didn't really realize that Kaiser was playing Sewanee, which this was one game that I circled, and I'm like, yo, this is a Kaiser wins by 10 goals statement game, a big Southern situation. Maybe they're recruiting against the same, kids, and they're going to win kids over by winning this game type of thing. Not what I expected at all. To be honest with you, even though it was close, that's still just super weird to me. And maybe Sewanee has gotten a lot better than the last time I checked, or maybe they have a lot more kids. It's kind of one of those schools that's up there. But that was another one that it's just, again, it's kind of two scores back to back that just don't make a whole lot of sense.
We're 100% on the same page on this one. And then moving on, this was a pretty exciting game. And I think most people kind of thought this game maybe a little underrated nationally, but I think for the AAC perspective, a lot of us knew this to be a pretty good one. And it was St. Andrews versus SCAD. St. Andrews won 11-9. And a lot of people were texting me because St. Andrews was down pretty big at half, and that kind of caught some people off guard. I think they ended up scoring 7 or 8 in a row to take the lead and end up winning by 2. Thoughts on that one?
St. Andrews saves their deservedness of getting national votes in this game, because this is a game they had to win. Like I see this as, I'm not saying Kaiser, I'm not saying SCAD is down bad, because SCAD's not down bad. We know they have good players still, but they were just another question mark team that nobody really knew much about. St. Andrews was getting national votes. They were pumping out the media. They were signing recruits left and right. They had a deep roster. They were putting all the stuff on the line. This was, in my mind, a must win for St. Andrews. They turned the game around. They won. I don't really know where SCAD stands after this game. And again, that's just because I don't really know where St. Andrews stands. I think until St. Andrews plays like a really kind of top 5 opponent situation, I won't really know where St. Andrews stands. Like when St. Andrews plays Cumberlands, I'll know what's going on. But after them playing SCAD, I don't know too much of what's going on. But I believe this was the game where the goalie came out from SCAD and absolutely leveled a player.
He did. That
was wild. That was wild. That's some NLL type stuff right there.
We had some hits this week. Usually there's a couple, but there was like 4 or 5 where I was like, just like, good Lord, this week, just bodies flying.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It was a tough weekend. It was. There was a lot of rough and tough hitting, and you love to see it. It's great for the brand. Um, I think it's a good win. I think it's a good win. I think that's the only way to say it against SCAD, because SCAD's not up there as one of our top 10 teams right now. With St. Andrews receiving top 10 national votes, they should have won this game. They needed to win this game. They won it. Kudos to them. I don't know who SCAD has next. I think if I had to wager right now, I bet SCAD's a 500 team this year. Just depends on who and when they play.
That sounds about right. I mean, I think unfortunately for them, I think they mostly play AAC teams, and it appears the top half of the AAC is still going to be very strong. So if that's the case, then 500 maybe kind of maxing it out.
True that.
And then moving on to our final game of the week before we make some picks going on to next week, we had Concordia 9, Kalamazoo 6. And if you didn't watch this one, the lacrosse at times wasn't the best, but it was more so just because these two teams just absolutely wanted to kill each other. So it was a very entertaining game. Did you get a catch? Tucker?
Yeah, I caught bits and pieces of it. I don't think it was pretty lacrosse most of the time. It was scary lacrosse, if anything. I think there is some bad blood between Kalamazoo and Concordia Ann Arbor. They've played each other, I think, 3 springs in a row now early on. And if I recall, all the games have been pretty physical, tough games. And I also think almost all these games have been close games. I think that's the other thing to keep in mind here. I personally don't think Kalamazoo is a very good D3 team. I think they're an okay D3 team, especially with the teams that they play normally. I think with all we were hearing from Concordia, I would have expected Concordia to win by maybe 4 or 5 more goals. But I think the only thing that stood in the way of that was the chirping, the physicality, the penalties. I think it was just little stuff that stood in the way. I don't think it was gameplay or lack of offense that stood in the way from the extra goals in that win. I just think it was that things got a little bit out of control during that game. And I also got to say, when officials lose control of a game, they lose control of a game and everything goes downhill. And I'm not one to really shame officials, but it looked like this game had gotten out of the hands of the officials.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to call anybody out on this one either, but there definitely should have been at least one player ejected.
Yeah, why are we body slamming people? Like what?
At Kalamazoo, I mean, I'm not saying Concordia didn't have a part in this because there was absolutely bodies flying along that sideline, but I just look up and I just see a full-on body slam one of the Kalamazoo guys on Concordia. And then all I'm seeing is like a 1-minute penalty for that. I'm like, really? That's it?
Yep. And I think there's another kind of like narrative here that unless you're from like Ohio or Michigan, people don't understand it. But in Ohio and Michigan especially, D3 teams think that they are holy, and they think that NAI teams are like below club level. Like there is a big hatred towards NAI teams in Ohio for sure, and definitely parts of Michigan that I've heard that the D3 teams just think that they are 115 times better than NAI teams. And I've seen a lot of games in that region between D3 and NAI teams get out of control like this. A lot of the times I think it's because the D3 guys expect that they're going to go in there and just steamroll or whatever it may be. And that's just a big stigma between the two levels in that region. And I like to see Concordia win that much more because of it.
Yeah, I was unaware of that. So if so, I'm glad that Kalamazoo's holding the 2 L's to NAI instead of just 1.
That's right. It's a double L. Yeah.
And then, so that's pretty much the end of this week. Moving on to next week, we have a lot of good games to come.
Oh, yeah.
So jumping into our picks, game 1, Weber versus St. Andrews. Who you got? If that's
let me make some notes here so I can actually get the people a graphic as they want. So Weber, St. Andrews. What day is this?
It's on Friday.
Okay, so both teams have had time to recover and rest, and play in some nice weather and all those amenities that we don't have here. But gosh, Weber and St. This is fun. This is one that I think is totally up for anyone to take right now. I wish I would have seen Weber play SCAD, because then I would really know how this game's going to go. But as of right now, I'm pulling Weber. I'm pulling Weber just because I don't know that St. Andrews has anybody that's going to seriously lock down Q.
Yeah,
but I don't know. But this is one of those situations where I could see it being a 1-goal overtime. I don't feel it really. If St. Andrews is able to lock down key players on Weber, the score is flopped. I see it going the other way. But for the sake of this argument, I'm leaning Weber. I'm going to say I'm picking Weber, but I'm not going to be shocked if it goes a different direction.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you. I just don't know who's going to slow down the key guys for Weber. My brother and parents are going to be there on a recruiting visit for St. Andrews. So I hope that St. Andrews plays well just because of that reason. But overall, I'm going to have to take Weber on this one.
All right. We're going to take that one. All right, next game. What do we got?
Concordia at Cumberlands. That'll be a big-time matchup.
Wow. Gosh.
I feel like that the Concordia game would have just been more so just lacrosse today. So I would feel a little bit better about where Concordia is at. Cause I don't know. I just really don't take too much away from how they played today. So it's hard for me to say who's going to win. I guess give me Cumberlands at home in a very close one.
I got Cumberlands. I got Cumberlands because if things get chippy from the Concordia side at all, like they did against Kalamazoo, Cumberlands is going to take that and run with it. They're not going to shy away from that. That's going to be something in their wheelhouse. But it is a situation that if Concordia Ann Arbor, if they are in a situation where their offense starts clicking, then it could be a different score. But I'm with it. I'm gonna go Cumberlands right now.
Okay, liking it so far. Dearborn versus T-Dub.
Oh man,
that's a good one.
This one hurts my brain.
I'll go first if you need me to.
You go. I got to think about this.
I'm taking T-Dub and the experience they have at pole, and then they're going to have pretty much a face-off advantage against anybody they play. So I think those two factors come into play. T-Dub wins, maybe by 3 or 4 goals.
All right. I'm going to take Dearborn only on the upset and picking against you for one game. And also the fact that I do think Dearborn's going to be a little shocky at times. I do think the experience leans on T-Dub, but I'm going to go Dearborn. I'm going to play the cards here and see how it goes.
Okay. I like it. We have Aquinas versus Mobap. Mobap's kind of one of the teams we haven't really talked much about. I don't know what their head coaching situation is right now, because last time I checked, they promoted the grad assistant to kind of interim situation, but then they reopened the job recently, it seemed like. So
true.
I don't really know what they have going on, so I'm just going to take Aquinas big.
Oh man, that's a tough one. So from what I know about Mobap, I've played against them 3 years in a row, 2 years in a row since they joined the KCAC. They're good. They're strong. They're physical. I think in a lot of ways they probably match up with Aquinas. I think that it's probably a pretty even games in a lot of facets, but the coaching situation at the moment, I'm a little bit unsure of. And also the depth of Mobap right now, I'm also unsure of. I guess Aquinas might be a little bit more sturdy. I think I'm gonna pull Mobap on this though, just on the fact that they have quite a few key transfers, quite a few key D2 transfers that I think could help them, especially on the defensive end. That if they just play strong defense, I think that they're in this game. So I'm gonna take Mobap on this, but I don't think it's gonna be a huge goal differential type of game.
Okay, fair enough. And then this one, I'm pretty sure Well, maybe not. I think we're going to be on the same page on this one. Maybe you'll surprise me. Indiana Tech versus Benedictine.
Wow.
Because at first I thought I was like Indiana Tech, just take them all day. But now I'm slightly more hesitant, but I'm still going to take Indiana Tech. But at first I was like, because remember, Indiana Tech absolutely destroyed Benedictine in the season opener last year. If you remember that one. So I was thinking Indiana Tech might do the same again, but now I'm starting to think it might be a little bit closer, but I'm still going Indiana Tech.
I feel like this is the most unsure I felt out of any game because I didn't expect what I saw from Benedictine and I didn't expect from what I saw about Indiana Tech. Both of them were not what I expected. I have to think that Indiana Tech wants a redemption game to win big. I also think, though, that in a lot of ways, Benedictine plays pretty similarly to Ambrose. So if one team's not pulling away from the start, then that game's going to be a 1-goal game the entire time. For the sake of the KCAC, I'm picking Benedictine.
I like it. Moving on. This might be the game of the week to me, I think. Well, no, I guess Concordia Cumberlands would be, but this would be the second one then. Aquinas versus CC.
Wow. What is going on with these games? Come on, man. Golly. Give me one good game. Come on. Golly. Okay. Wait, say that again. It's Aquinas versus Columbia. Man, what? I'm going Columbia. Yeah, Columbia is just like in my mind, Columbia is a very, very, very strong team, and they always play well from the start. They're not really a team that seems to need to get their footing. Like they seem to play well from the beginning of the season. Aquinas is going to be a few games in by this point. They're going to have to play MOBAP before playing Columbia, and MOBAP is strong physical defense. I'm going to take Columbia on this just from everything I know. But I guess I wouldn't be totally shocked if Aquinas does something differently. And I think especially depending on how that game goes against Missouri Baptist is going to drastically affect how the game against Columbia goes.
Yeah, I agree with that. If they can get up on MOBAP pretty quick and get some subs in there, that'd definitely go a long way. I think I'm going to take CC in this one, but I don't love the pick. I don't even know if I'll stick with that once the game comes around. I may flip flop, but I'm going to take CC. I'm a little nervous. Just it's tough when there's someone's season opener versus someone who's a couple games in. I think I would probably take Aquinas if this was their only game this week, but being tired, I'll take CC.
Agreed.
And we got 2 left. Right. Weber, SCAD.
Weber and SCAD. I'm taking Weber. I just think that Weber's in a position now where they need to win that game first off for sure, but they also have a lot more guys than SCAD.
Yeah, I want Weber. I'm taking them all day, I think. And the final one will be another interesting one. Indiana Tech versus Ottawa.
Ooh, okay. So Ottawa is in a good spot this year. They're looking solid from everything I can tell. All signs point up. Seems like they had a good recruiting class come in. They retained a lot of their key players. They continue to build a stronger and stronger program. They have coaching consistency year in, year out. You'll love to see that. Again, this is one that depends on how Indiana Tech's game goes earlier in the week. I'm going to pick Indiana Tech in this one because I think by this point they're going to 100% want to win a game regardless of what happens. But I will say the one kind of caveat about this game, don't be surprised if Ottawa's offense is a lot to handle for Indiana Tech. Now, I'm not saying that I think Indiana Tech's going to lose, but I think Ottawa's going to hold their own, if not more, depending on how their offense goes.
Yeah, this is one earlier in the week. If you have told me I was going to be making this prediction, I would have said something totally different. I think Indiana Tech has the talent advantage. I don't know about coaching, maybe the coaching advantage as well. So Indiana Tech should win this game, but they won't. Give me Ottawa.
All right. All right, there we go. We got some different picks this week from some hard games.
Absolutely go off. I'm saying combined, I'm thinking DeMarco brothers 10 goals.
I actually think that's expected. Now, no pressure on them. Like, I'm not going to be the one to because like I got to play you guys later this season. Like, I have to step on a field with these guys. So like, no pressure to you. No, no big deal. But I think that they're going to do very well. I do. And the thing that I look about this Ottawa Indiana Tech game is I think Ottawa sees this as a statement game for sure. No doubt about it. Right. It's their first game of the year. They're itching to play some lacrosse. I think on top of that, though, I think that Ottawa probably is a little bit stronger in some areas as from what we've seen than Indiana Tech. I guess I'm just going to take Indiana Tech to pick different from you. I think that this is going to be a 2-goal margin game. And I don't think it's going to be overtime, but I think it's going to come towards the end that we're going to see one team kind of make a difference on the other.
Yeah, and I mean, I could be totally wrong on this one. Like, I would, in all honesty, I would not be surprised if Indiana Tech was just like, screw this, wins by 14. But I think Ottawa's going to win it, and I'm sticking to it.
All right. No, I like that. No, I'm sticking with it too. We're good. We got some great lacrosse coming up. We're going to see what's going on in the KCAC. We're going to have a better idea what's going on in the WAC. Big week for those two. Like, I think actually probably more than anything, just a big week for the KCAC and the WAC.
Yeah, very busy schedule coming up. I guess the final question I'll ask you before we leave, I don't even know how long we've been going so far, but what are your final thoughts kind of on what the top 10 should look like? Because I know we have another poll coming out Wednesday.
There we go.
We've seen some lacrosse, but like there's like a big category from like 4 to like 15 where I'm just like, I don't even know.
All right, so the teams who haven't played stay probably pretty close to where they are, unless a team won who jumped them. I definitely think Ambrose moves up in the poll. I think Kaiser maybe drops by 1 or 2 situation. I don't think they're going to drop a whole lot because they didn't play NAI teams, and you got to keep that in mind. I know the voters keep that in mind as well. So I think Ambrose takes a big jump. I think Indiana Tech probably takes a decent drop. I think they stay in the top 10. It wouldn't be fair to say they don't stay in the top 10. I think William Penn moves up. Okay, so in the top 10, I got William Penn in a good spot. I got Ambrose in a very good spot. I got Indiana Tech somewhere in there, lower than they were. Those are for sure 3 I can think of. Reinhardt's an easy 1. You can count them at 1, no doubt about it. Was Weber in the top 10?
Weber was receiving votes, and so was Aquinas and Sienna Heights. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what they do with that, with Weber splitting those 2.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That's tough. I guess I can only think of those 4. I think everybody else from not playing probably stays pretty much the same. I mean, I guess the question is, do they take into account the Benedictine score? And in that situation, I don't want to say I'd replace Benedictine with a team, but I would consider it.
I personally, and this is no disrespect to those teams, I'm taking Benedictine and Lords out. I haven't even seen Lords yet, but I'm dropping them. I
feel like those are 2 teams, like regardless of what happened, because the rest of the teams did really good, I think that they drop and the other teams climb.
Yeah, and I would probably put Aquinas and Weber both in their places.
Yeah, I do. I think so too. I think Aquinas deservingly should be in there. Reinhardt's in a top situation. I think I'm most curious right now to see, and you got a poll out there. I'm most curious to see where Ambrose falls in it. That's a big situation.
I mean, I have no problem putting him. You could throw them at number 2, honestly, and I would agree with you. Like, yeah. I wouldn't have. I think 2 or 3 seems about right. I mean, I have Indiana Tech lurking somewhere around 5 to 6. Cumberlands, it was a decent win today, but it wasn't anything like crazy. So I would probably feel comfortable putting Ambrose ahead of them for 2, but I wouldn't complain if you move Cumberlands to 2. I'm dinging Kaiser a little bit just for the scores. Like I know they were non-NAI games, but still small red flags. I'm putting Kaiser probably around 4.
Yep.
Right now I have Reinhardt. I don't want to say head and shoulders at 1, but I'm gonna say it's head and shoulders, guys. It's like I don't see it any other way right now, and I'm not trying to be that guy, but that's just how I'm feeling right now. Any disagreements on that one?
No, I don't. I guess in the situation we're in right now in this week, I have no problem thinking that Reinhardt's winning it all again. It's what we've seen from them is beyond dominant. And I guess the other thing to think about this is that we went into this not knowing how the coaching change would affect Reinhardt. I think it's affecting them in a very healthy way because we are seeing free, fun, fast pace, and extremely aggressive lacrosse from Reinhardt. Like the fact that they're putting those highlight reels out and they look so saucy, like they look saucy. Like those highlight reels are sick. And I watched one tonight. I was sitting on my phone and I was like, yo, this is cool lacrosse. But like they're playing at a level that I think it's going to be really hard for any team to match. I think that they stay at 1 throughout all of, if not the entire season.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how things shake out later in the year, but I'm feeling good about it so far for them.
Yep. I
All
like
right.
it.
About it. I'm gonna head to sleep now. Sorry if I seemed a little tired today. But yeah. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
See you guys. Have a good one.